Can you hear me?
Hi, hi.
What's up? Hi.
Yeah. How you
How are
doing,
you?
Ayo?
How are you doing? I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Very well.
We're ready for today, right?
Yes. So Yes, I
We
am.
just have we just have like few minutes to go, so our guest can really give us the fire because we're ready. We really want to know how to, have work with you, how to craft a maintainable code based on the JavaScript aspect. We are looking towards a particular programming language, which is JavaScript. So,
Okay.
and we just have few minutes to go, 3 minutes to go. Then we
Yeah,
start.
that's good. Awesome.
Uh,
I'm actually looking forward to be hearing a lot of what's the word now? The grammars you guys use in JavaScript.
Programming languages.
Uh-huh. All
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully I
It's
won't
just
run
a
away.
pity our podcast people, the community people in the podcast will be missing out because they'll be getting this entire information after we are done with the live. For those that want
Okay.
the podcast, because we need to convert to audio and then post on the podcast platforms for them.
Mm, okay.
So,
Yeah. So we
mm,
are just waiting now. We're just waiting. We have 2 minutes more. 2 minutes to go. And but before then, you write JavaScript now. Can you still hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Now I was just saying that you write JavaScript too now. So if you can just give us very small,
Well,
what we should
everybody,
be
when it
expecting.
comes to we get this gist of um when you are in dev, you have your language, the language you communicate with the system. Some persons will say
Mm,
Java is hard. Another person will say no, JavaScript is hard. Another person will say no, it's .NET. Like there are a lot of languages, but I see JavaScript to be quite, I wouldn't say easy, right? Maybe because now I know it, I can say okay, it's easy. Because when I started tech, I started with just knowing HTML and CSS. And funny part, I thought HTML and CSS was like the language. So I told myself,
wow,
no, I'm not learning JavaScript. I've done HTML and CSS. I'm already a developer.
that's it.
I didn't know that there was more to you knowing a language. And
And this
HTML and
that's it.
CSS is not even like a programming language. They're just like markup languages and styling
Mm,
shit. So I really didn't know all of this. I just felt, you know, that I don't want to learn JavaScript, and that was the thing I just said. I'm not learning JavaScript until when I started, and I said, oh, really? JavaScript is kind of cool, you know, but then it takes a lot of time because it took me for a while to really understand how JavaScript is, how it works, all of the function, calling of variables, declaring a function, and all of that. It took me like, I remember times I'll be like, okay, we are done with lessons, but I need to still put my books together, understand what this really is. You understand? So it took some time for
yeah,
me
I
to like
guess.
grab what JavaScript and the only good part of it is JavaScript is when you know JavaScript, which is like the basic, you understand the foundation very well. It's very easy to navigate through any of its frameworks.
Mm,
That's the thing. You understand? And what people don't know is they want to jump on the framework and then the JavaScript is like, it's not it. Personally, for me, it took me time. I really struggled with JavaScript. I wouldn't lie. I struggled a lot trying to even understand JavaScript
but but
on
now
its
it's like
own. But
it's a child's play for you.
I wouldn't say, right? Because the boss is here, so we are here to learn from him together. I'm also here to
Okay.
learn. Yeah, he has more experience in the field than I do, and that's why Tech with Hero is like the platform whereby we get people that are more experienced to come share
Mm-hmm.
ideas with us, and I personally learn from them too. So I know how to do it better in my own field. I go back to my own place of work and I do something better. You understand? So we are all doing it
Yeah.
together. We're all learning. I'm also learning with the learners, with the listeners, right? It's just like a channel that brings in people that are experts in the field to come share experience. So we learn from them and do things better. You understand? So
Mm.
it's a good one. We'll start in 6:05.
Okay.
Um,
So I guess we can just continue our own gist before the guest.
and yeah, not really continue our own gist. Maybe we can gist about the guests,
Okay.
vibes. We can talk about the guests.
Okay. Oh, I was wondering why I was alone.
To properly introduce the guests is not easy. Even my network had to shake small. Okay, for today, guys, we'll be talking about crafting maintainable code. We are looking towards a particular language, which is JavaScript. So we'll be talking about JavaScript architectural best practices. And we have with us Anthony Onyekachiku Okonta, right? He's going to be sharing his own knowledge about how you can craft a maintainable code. Anthony Onyekachi Okonta has a total of 11 years experience. Like, come on, you can't afford to miss this. You can't
11 years.
afford to miss this. Yes, you can't afford to miss this. So, he has 11 years experience in software development with different coding languages like the VBNet, the C Sharp, the Java, and JavaScript. He has worked in different industries, which include financial, education, and fintech, building scalable applications. He graduated in 2010 from Novena University, Ogume, Delta State, Nigeria, and obtained a bachelor's in information technology. He is also an author of a book called React JS Design Patterns. Imagine somebody that wrote about a book in React JS. Definitely, the person has
Hi.
great foundation when it comes to the language itself, right?
True.
Okay, and we get this a lot from all of our guests. I don't know why everybody's just saying, "I love football. I love football." Okay, he also
I
loves
go
football
Wilson.
and hanging out with friends. We'll see. Yeah, yeah. So currently he's working at Lufthansa Digital Anger at the moment, and he's working there as a senior front-end developer. Wow, wow, woo. Let's bring to the stage our boss himself, the boss of the boss of the boss. Let's bring
Yes.
Anthony Okonta on stage.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Hi,
Hi. Hello.
hi, Anthony.
Hi, hi.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Doing great.
You're ready for us, right?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I can feel the
We're also
excitement
ready.
already.
Well,
We're also ready for you.
we're also ready for you. we have we've shared the topic to our community, and we've gotten information, some questions that we're told to ask you. So we'll just wait till when you are done with your entire information with us, then we share ours with you.
Mhm.
Okay.
So maybe you should start with like a brief introduction about yourself, then we'll like dive deep into today's event.
All right. Thank you, Nkechi. Thank you, Ayo. My name is Anthony Rekatiku Kunta. I'm from Nigeria. Currently, I work as a senior front-end developer at Lufthansa Tikita Hangar. So it's part of Lufthansa Group in Germany. I'm based in Germany. I have over 12 years. Now it's 12 years because we're in 2024 now. 12 years professional experience as a software engineer. I started from VB.NET, moved to C Sharp, did Java, did mobile development with Kotlin and Android with Java, did some Objective C. Then, yeah, I decided that, okay, it's time for me to come into what is trending, JavaScript actually. And I've been a JavaScript developer for about going to 7, 8 years now, but more of a full stack though, because I also do backend, do lots of database designs. So that is in a little bit, and also I'm an author actually. I wrote some React.js design patterns, that book last year, and I'm working on another book, right, for React.js design patterns. So that's a little bit about it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. First is I don't know if the other persons can actually check the chat, so they get the information already dropped there. And moving to the next, would you want to like share a slide so we can just like start into your crafting maintainable code?
Um, so funny enough, okay, sorry, I didn't bring a slide to this because I know it like all, and I can give it in details what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to start with maintainable code, right? In software development, there's something called
Okay.
do it as you like,
Okay.
as far it works, right? So there is no real standard to software development because some people say go with, for example, naming conventions could be Pascal or Camel case. It depends on the organization, but there are some standard best practices. So in JavaScript, you are not allowed to just write as you like. If it's a personal project, you can actually write it as you like, right? The problem with writing it as you like is that it becomes unmaintainable. Even if it's working, it might not be scalable, it might not be testable. These are the things that you should consider when you are developing an application, right? So you need to start that who will use this application, who will actually come after me. You think for the remaining people coming after you. That is where you need to now sit down and plan your architecture. Now there are different kind of architecture. So we have the monolith and we have the microservice. So the
Okay.
monolith, actually everything is modeled together. So you have your front end, back
Yeah.
end, you have your shared services, everything is dependent on each other, right? The problem with that is if you are writing for one part, maybe I'm developing something for the back end, and it's in a monolith application, it can affect the front end, right? Because the front end is not supposed to know what the back end guys are doing. So if I write the code in that way, you can have issues. You can have regression issues. So maybe I change something, it affects one part of the application. The advice usually is to move to a microservice architecture, right? In
Yeah.
doing that kind of thing for a backend because the services are separated. Now the services don't rely on each other. They don't rely on like they're not tightly coupled. They are loosely coupled so that if one part of the application is down, others can continue functioning, right? So you need to consider that in terms of the architecture, right? It's not all the time that you need a microservice. It depends on the organization and how scalable you want your application to be. Another thing you could consider is micro front end. Now I'm talking about the front end also. If you're considering micro front end is just having your full monolith application broken down into bits and pieces on the front end, so that each team can actually work on one part. So you can have people working on the finance module, some people working on the payments module. All these are actually separate folders, or they can be separate applications that are linked together with a shared library that binds all of them together. So holistically, you can actually think of the application that way. Now, if you've thought about the structure, you're now going to think about how you're going to write the code. Now, there are principles we should all follow. So there are principles. There's something called the solid principles. It's a part of software design pattern. There is the KISS principle. Keep it simply simple. Like, it's very simple. And there is also the dry pattern, right? Don't repeat yourself. Because if you have these principles in place, you would actually write maintainable applications. Now, you need to also consider separation of consent. It's also the first part of solid principles, right? Because solid principles are actually 5. But in JavaScript, I think we just use more of the KISS and the dry pattern. A lot of people don't use the main, like, they don't know what the solid principle is, right? So the solid principle is the first one is single responsibility principle. So what it does is that if class does one thing, or a function does one thing, a function should just return, maybe we are saying convert to Boolean, or sorry, not or convert to number. It should be doing that thing alone, right? You don't need to now write another thing inside and you write other functions inside. When it converts to a number, you should now check if the number is greater than 20, if it's this. No, it should just be that responsibility. So that class module of function should only be responsible for that, right? So it should have that reason. You are not doing any other thing again with it, right? Then you have other parts of, like, it could be a function that could calculate employee salary. It could calculate your days off. It should just be that function. It takes in a parameter and it returns, or it doesn't take in anything. It returns what you want it to do. Finish, right? That is one thing that people need to actually look at for the solid principles. There are like 5 principles there. Then you have the open close principle, right? This principle is very important when you're implementing large scale applications. So what it does is that whenever you are adding a new feature to such an application, this principle should be followed, because you want that classes and functions should be extendable. They should not be modified. So whatever it is you are writing, if you're writing a function, you should be able to extend such function. Now, this is not possible with your plain JavaScript, right? It's possible when you're using TypeScript, because this is what I'm saying is object-oriented principle, right? But it's possible with TypeScript. It's not possible with your plain JavaScript, right? So it should be extendable. So if I'm saying that, let's say we want to calculate salaries, right? Or want to calculate salaries. If we pass in that salaries as an array or something, right? Maybe it's going to calculate your hourly rate. Normally, you are not supposed to modify the array that is passed inside, maybe the salaries. You're not supposed to modify it. You are supposed to extend that class to actually do that calculation for you. But these principles, not everyone follows it, I must say, because there's no time when you're developing software. You are thinking about delivery to market and actually time counts. Now, there are other principles like the interface segregation principle. So what that principle does is that it's just for interfaces, right? So the interface, um, um, so I'm going to give an example. These interfaces, right? In you want your interfaces to actually be segregated, right? So whenever you're pushing code, right? So whenever you're trying to implement code, it should not be based on it's being modified. Like it should, like whatever you pushed should depend mainly on those interfaces, right? That is the basic principle. Now, let me now leave these solid principles and go to the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. So if you have a large application that you write, so we're checking is user found here, or you're checking for a function, converts to something. You can now, you write it somewhere. If it's something that you're going to use actually in the entire application, you make it as a reusable function. Is a helper class. You can put it in a helper class or a helper function that is exported, right? Instead of you writing, let's say, instead of you writing calculate salary, you write it here. You are not exporting it. It's just being used in that component, or it's being used in that form. You go to another place. You write calculate salaries mid-month. They are indirectly the same function because because they are indirectly the same function because the problem is that that function can actually accept a parameter and do whatever you want it to do. But you have repeated yourself, and if there is a change across, you will not be able to maintain it. So you are going to have people writing their own functions around the application. So you should have one function that is not repeated, and you should be able to use it across your application, right? That is the dry principle. Then you have the KISS principle. Keep it simply simple. Please, you don't need to over-engineer things. People call it that you write spaghetti code. Some spaghetti code are much more efficient than the one you write heaven and earth, and you write 200 lines, and someone is looking like, what's going on here? Right? Keep it simple, right? If it's too long, break it into different functions or methods that are readable, because it doesn't make sense that you have one function that is 200 lines. Who is going to read that? Even if you raise a pull request, I'll look like, what is going on here? The code is working, right? But I cannot come and start reading line by line for 200 lines for a function. It doesn't make sense. So what is important is that you as a person break all those long codes into different functions, right? That are readable. My advice to people is that don't keep a function more than max 100 lines. In my years of experience working in 3 countries, right? When people see that your code is more than 100 lines in a function, they will reject that PR. They will start asking like, is this guy all right? Why are you writing more than 100 lines? So I advise people, please reduce your function lines to 100. It's at least 100. Sorry, at most 100. It is very important. Very, very important. So then when you are now looking at some another thing is also to keep your loggers in place. Now, this is just not just JavaScript, it's part of the architecture, because if there are issues in the application, you should have logs, because something might change, there might be an issue, right? There might be a place that you don't want to, like there are issues on the application. You really need to find out where the problem is. You should place loggers. It is very important because it points out to where the issues are coming from. You don't just blindly code and write a big architecture like that and you just leave it that way. You're going to have some serious problems, right? So these are the fundamental things you should consider when writing an application. They are very, 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 very important, right? I know most of us will not follow it because we just want to get started. We want to get started. We want to just get started and finish what we are doing. But it is very important. It depends on the application you are writing, right? Now, you should also consider, as a bonus, writing unit tests. A lot of people don't like writing tests, me included. Forget the ones that we all preach, unit tests, we form jest and enzyme or cypress. Most of us don't write tests. It's very important actually, because it can help you safeguard your application at least 95%, then you bind the remaining ones to extra user input and things you never thought about. Because in general, it is important that you should do TDD principles, test driven design, right? But a lot of us don't do that test driven design. We start from just writing the code, let it work. That can actually make you structure your application with these principles I have said, right? So with these things have actually talked about, you can actually write an application that can grow. Because if your application is going to be extendable, right? It is not rough, it is not tightly coupled, it is loosely coupled, right? It means that you should follow all these principles, except it's your personal application. You just want to do it for one client, hit the ground running, collect your money and move, and let it just be like that. But if it's an application that is going to be maintainable, you are working in an environment, you should be able to understand these principles no matter how, even if you want to use even if you are using a library, even if you're using a library or you're using or you're just writing your normal JavaScript code, right? You should also follow these principles. It's very, very important. Thank you.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so
Uh,
much. I think before we continue, first let me give like a notice to people that are joining on StreamYard. Please kindly look at the chat. You're supposed to join the YouTube channel and not the StreamYard. Thank you. BC, Efe, and T. Kindly check the chat and join the YouTube live. Thank you. Yeah, Ayo, you can go ahead.
yeah, I was just about to say that I really enjoyed the session already, so far, and I could pick up some principles. I'm not a developer like you both, but I'm a designer and I could pick some principles already, and I could see some familiarities and similarities between designs and developments. Like they keep it simple. You mentioned, and is one of the key things that I just feel everybody would want to implement in whatever thing they want to do. So as to avoid complexity for the users and for ourselves too, in one way or the other. And yeah, nice getting some jargons of the industries. And I love the way you were able to break some words down for me to even grasp. Yeah, so that's it for me. So I don't know if Hero has more things to say.
Definitely, I do, right? So, um, some acronyms as to the drive, the keys,
Mm-hmm.
and all. So, I would want to ask this because I think I got some questions. I got some questions from people while I had already sent in this topic to community, the tech community, just to get some questions that they would want me to ask you. And someone is coming from this point of when you have a project ready, right? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I think we just lost Hero on the call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
we're back.
I really don't know what's wrong with the StreamYard network for today. I think
You're good now. We can hear you. Uh, Okay. So, but me, I have one question.
Okay.
While we're waiting for Euro to get a network together and all. So my own question is, I want to actually hear from you. You know how we have been able to, because I know that there's sometimes when you code, you get to have other people to, like collaborations with teammates and all. Are there times where when you're coding, you try to consider people, like your teammates that might want to work on the code, and how do you get to make the code easy for team working and all?
Yes. So
Yeah, that's the question, really.
okay. So there are basic principles you should know as a software developer, right? Number one, that is basic, is don't give ambiguous naming conventions, right? So when I see your naming in your, you should follow the general principles, like the basic principles of that of software development. Number one, that's part of best practices. You don't give ambiguous naming. So if I'm going to name a function that returns a boolean, which is true or false, I will usually start with is, right?
Mm,
So let's say I want to
Okay.
say is greater than 25 or is above age. It makes sense. It's
Mm,
above 25. It makes sense. At the first glance, you see it. Everybody, I believe every software developer has their own, like, um, their intelligence. So they will understand what that function does. But not
true.
when I will write something like um, greater than or greater than age. It doesn't make sense because what age are we talking about? But when you say, and that's greater than age, I don't know if it returns, if it's just a void, if it returns a number, if it returns a boolean. But when I see things like is, I already understand that keyword is. It returns a true or false. That's like it's not a standard, but it's generally accepted. So when you write all such things, it gives you an understanding that okay, this is what this person is talking about. You've already considered them. So you need to put into consideration that you don't need to hurry to finish the task, but think of other people coming behind you. So that someone like me will not pick your code and I will say, what's going on here? I'll try to understand, try as much as possible to understand. And I'll be like, okay, please, can we call the developer? Because I don't know what that is. So, but when I see your functions, I already know what it is. Secondly, like I said, keep it simple. Break your functions down. Don't go and write something that is so long that only you that know what you were thinking when you were there writing it. So these are the things you should consider when you are collaborating. But again, it's called we're software developers. There's a reason why they didn't give us software engineer because it's not like 22/7 and pi is equals to 3.142 standard worldwide. There are people who have this thinking of that it should be Pascal case, it should be Camel case, different walks of life. But I feel that you should put yourself out there to understand the best practices and what the organization likes to do. Remember at the beginning of this conversation, you can write it anyhow to work. But writing it anyhow is just to you alone if you're on a personal project. So you should keep updating yourself on the best practices. That's what I do. Despite writing React for over 5, 6 years now, even when I wrote the book, there are other best practices I've seen in 2024, and I keep updating myself to share with my teammates. So I feel that you should also check how to structure things so that you're always in touch with reality, not just, okay, I know it, this is how it's going to work. And also try to communicate your ideas because if you are communicating your ideas, maybe through comments, function comments. So maybe I'm writing one ambiguous comment. I can put a comment and say, hello, this is what this ABCD means, just in case you are in a hurry. So these are the things you can actually use to better collaborate with people.
So are you saying when you have, for example, the company is starting a new project and you have like four people trying to work on the project, are you saying, for example, the front end developers now, like say there are three and the back end, there are like three. Are you saying they should come together to agree on the entire structure, the entire pattern of namings and all of that before they even kickstart?
Okay, so in my experience, and this is what I This is what I tell my experience, right? If there is no clear cut way of doing things, right? Is a fresh application. Most companies start fresh applications, but they already have some functions in other projects. They have their base classes that they are going to import. But in case there are no, it's just a fresh, let's say, fresh department, you are trying to create something. There's something called we should have a design session, right? A design session. If we're going to come together as a team, understand what are the requirements for the application,
For the
what
project.
backend service, what database, what third party service, what the front end guys, the testers, all of us will come together. Then we cannot analyze the business requirement document or the requirements from the business and draw whatever I want, and everybody knows what is dependent on what. Then we can now sit down and say, what is the best way for this application to go when we have finished understanding what it's dependent on? There are different kinds of architecture. You will sit down and you will agree because it's all about business continuity. Everybody has different things in their head, everybody learns different, but we will not bring our different minds and put on the project. We need to agree business continuity. This is the way we're going to go. If we're going to have a helper function, we're going to have a helper function, right? A helper class. If we're going to have services different, our folder structure, we should have that. Not you going to watch one project on YouTube or you see something on Stack Overflow, you say, okay, this is the best way. Another person say, no, we should use Next.js, we should use Next.js, or we should use normal Create React app. You know, is both of you have your own different mindset. All of you should come together for the common goal to move the business forward. It is your personal project, you can do that. But that is the way I have in my career. That is what we do. We sit down and bring our ideas and we push for one
But
goal.
funny part is I think some developers really don't know this collaboration thing because there are some cases whereby okay I've experienced one time whereby you know by default there's some things that you just know that is repeated in the entire design and you just need to make it like a component like your modals. You know the modals are always repeated, right?
Yeah.
Because of okay it's the same modals, it's just different tests in inbuilt. So and you created a component and then the person you're working with is creating another component. Like it's creating because they'll just be like, okay, I want to use my own style method. Okay, I want to use, and I'm like, we're using it's like the same tailwind style method. So is there anything different? Can somebody use one same style framework and still have different methods they use that same styling framework? Because I was at some point I was like, I don't think we can scale better when we are having different components that are the same in the same folder.
Well, like it depends on the application. And that's why I said there's no clear-cut way to doing this thing. So, for example, Tailwind, you have your Tailwind CSS. I can also have my SAS. Sorry for everybody, I'm a fan of SAS. I just love SAS. I don't like Tailwind because I don't
I
like
know
writing.
people that like SaaS don't always like Tailwind. I don't know why. Because I
Well,
think I read through developers saying I love SaaS, I don't like Tailwind.
SAS is
You
my
guys
love. Like I love
you guys
SAS.
want to go through the ad routes because
No, it's
Tailwind
not
makes
about the
life
hard
easy.
route. No, it's not about the hard route.
Okay.
It's because normally I don't write like writing inline CSS.
So,
It's annoying.
oh,
It makes the code just look somehow. So I love writing
oh,
it in, and it's
a
always modular.
different folder.
Yeah. So it depends on you what you want. People can I can have tailwind in a project. But what I want to achieve, I can use normal CSS3, like your vanilla CSS, to write it. So I can add my CSS to that. It will still work. But the problem is that if everyone starts using that, so you have styled components, you have SAS, someone comes write less because he's used to less, someone writes tailwind, someone write modular
What help
CSS,
the project?
you will just get the project messed up. So
Seriously.
to put this thing, this is what organizations do right? To put a stop to this is why they put tools like they put tools like um, they put tools like Husky. Now, what Husky will do is that Husky will prevent you from
Okay.
creating some things. You can configure it that some things will never work. Even if it works on your local machine, you will not be able
Okay.
to put it
Push
to
it
the
to prod.
repository. It will just remain there on your system because you have not
Wow.
followed a certain pattern, right?
Okay.
Husky is not 100% reliable because you can bypass Husky, right? But it will also fail at, in case it passes before it gets to doing PR. Maybe it is if you are doing trunk-based developments, right? So trunk-based developments is committing direct to main as against raising a pull request. So you can just commit direct to main. You just be committing because you want faster time to production or faster time to market, right? So nobody is actually doing all the checking your code. So you can have things in place that can check that. You can configure your pipeline, right, to actually check for some jargons. You can actually have things like check marks on Sonia Cube to actually check for some security things if there are some vulnerabilities or if you've written absolute rubbish. So these are the things that one needs to consider. That's why we have different ideas, different mindsets,
I
different
think
approach
that
to the problem. But that's just the way to go.
okay. Thank you for that clarity. Okay, so I have another question here, and the question says, how do you approach performance optimization in JavaScript code without sacrificing maintainability?
Okay, so one thing you should always think about is you should actually check number one, look at the things like for scalability, you look at how heavy your images are. So the applications that are going to use static image, the applications that are going to use dynamic images, you should find a way to optimize such images. I was doing a project last year, and for some reason, when we just do npm starts, the application takes almost 3 minutes to load, and it's not calling anything from the backend. And I was like, how is this possible? I wrote lazy loading. It was still like that until I found out that the image was over 4 MB just to load.
Wow.
So I had to optimize the image, change the format, compressed it, but it was still high quality and it rendered well. So you need to consider your image. You also need to consider you also need to consider the type of application. Now, if you are going to have concurrent users of 100,000, if you are building an application that is like 100,000 users, you need to consider your backend. You need to consider the frequent ways you call your endpoint. So what am I trying to say? If I call, if I load users from the backend, I should be able to store it on my local storage, or I could use some things like Redux, or I could use some things like Redis. Now, Redis should store that if I am not going to, it should store that so that I don't go back to the backend all the time.
To
Because if I
call.
go back to the backend all the time, you need to consider the network. So across the wire, if you are using something like Glow, sorry to all Glow users, if you are using something like Glow, you are going to hate yourself and you are pulling 100,000. So you want to pull it the first time and put it and cache it somewhere on a place like
True.
Redis. That is the second one. Now, the third one, you should consider the language you are using. I'm a TypeScript fan. Now we're talking JavaScript. I'm a TypeScript fan. Now, there are things TypeScript will point you to that are potential issues.
Okay.
JavaScript will just let you pass. Sorry to all JavaScript fans. I still write JavaScript, but I'm a TypeScript lover. Now, TypeScript can help you now simulate and understand that this could potentially cause issues, right? And it could tell you a whole lot of things. So you can have there are also tools that you can actually have that you can configure that will tell you, okay, these are going to be issues. Then lastly, you should also consider the things I tell people mostly. You should consider your try and catch and consider your loop. Loop is very, very dangerous. I remember
Hmm.
I've worked in financial industry. I've seen what loops can do. Loops can turn your application, in fact, can bring everything down. You should be careful when you use that. Actually, the loop should actually have an exit point because any small thing can turn that thing into it's just going to take unnecessary time. So take your time to consider when using a loop, right? And lastly, last but not the least, if you have a an npm package that has been written that is scaling, don't reinvent the wheel, because if you reinvent the wheel yourself, you might not write it as optimized as that package. Yes, I know why I'm saying this, because people like, okay, I don't want to do it myself. You will land yourself in trouble because the application can start taking time, taking time, taking time. And if the images are dynamic, you can host it on your S3 buckets, right? You can host your images on your S3 buckets and you put the URL. So it's always, so in case you change,
Yeah, like Cloudinary.
yeah, Cloudinary also, you can put it there. And whenever you change the image, is going to reflect on your application instead of frequent deployment. So with these few tips, there are others, but let me keep it short. These are the basic ones that you encounter, and it's definitely fine for you.
Awesome, awesome. I don't know where Hero went to. Probably still the network issue and also, but
Sorry,
then
sorry.
okay.
Network, I don't know. I just mistakenly left the studio. Okay, I said so we have other questions really, but then I just want you to like quick on that so that I can ask you other questions. So should I go ahead with the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. This one is talking on how do you balance the need for refactoring um the code alongside maintaining your project timelines?
Okay, so this is this is the rule. I know it's personal to me, but it has worked for me in every
Okay.
application I've done. Let the project work first. Let whatever you're writing work first. Then you
Okay.
refactor. Don't spend much time writing, will this be good? Write it first. Write it first. Let it work. And
Okay.
if you are not, if it's working, thankfully, I'm not advising anybody, but this is what all of us do. There is bad and there's ChatGPT. Copy your function. Tell ChatGPT to optimize it for you.
For you.
Yes, you can copy it back. If it works, fine. Right? You should not spend time trying to, because I've seen pitfalls. People say, oh, this function, I could do it, I could do it, I could. No, 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 no. Your time is going. We paid you for the time to deliver. We're not paying you that you should start re-engineering, engineer. Let it work first, right?
Okay.
Then maybe at code review, someone can just put a comment. Developers can be nasty. Let it not be like in comment. Change this function. What if you put an if here? It's just something, but it's working, right? And I learned this thing when I did a project at Reddit. When I was working at Reddit, they will tell you, let it work first. When we do all our testing and deploy, when we test, then it's fine. Because I made that mistake. I just deployed one day to production, and with over almost 800 million users in the world on production, it was on Reddit. They started chatting me that this thing is slow. One thing is not aligned. The pixels is not. They were chatting, and if you see Slack that day, I had to roll back the change because people chatting everywhere. And what was the
The
issue?
tension alone.
Because that was
Jeez.
my first time deploying to production of over worldwide, right? They had over 100,000 users concurrently logged in.
Wow.
So with from there, when I at Reddit, my boss told me then that no, it's working fine, but did you test it? Did you optimize it? But he wanted me to push to production first. So he said it can happen. So let it
Okay.
work first, but
It's
there's
such
also
a
a
good
timeline.
word.
There is also a timeline.
Okay.
So let it work first, then you can optimize later. Everybody breaks
Okay.
production. Yeah.
Definitely. That was where I was like, oh wow. Because really, but the only thing that will come in is the tension. Because I can on the norms, right? I think I intentionally changed my Slack notifications like a very mild notification sound because the moment I just hear Slack, I don't know, my heart just beats. I don't know why. Even if it's not relating to me, my heart just beeps. Not to talk of when you have deployed. I, I can just imagine if you know with your system and you were literally on the road or trying to like just chill out. My God, your mind will not be where you.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think there are cases whereby like for me now, I have like a tech lead. So cases whereby we are done pushing our work and it's already on staging, QA can start testing. But we still do, okay, what are you doing today? Okay, what I want to do today is to clean up codes and refactor codes for a better optimization. And that's we also add that to like our tasks to we input that in our timeline to ensure that okay, while we've pushed already, we know it's working, but we just want like cleanups here and there based on we're not just the only one working. And most times when we discover that okay, this particular function that I used on this feature can also be used in another feature which like my colleague has used. So we kind of make it like a component or reusable functions that can be used other places and all to make to make things work fine. So maybe people can also adapt to that kind of a method, maybe when they have like a tech lead, but if there's no tech lead and it's like somebody that really don't understand the tech, basically, you just have to know how to do your stuff yourself. Okay, sorry, we're taking out of your time. I'll just ask this one question and maybe for others, we can just get their answers. We can share their questions to you and you like drop in answers for us to share to the community. So this one is measured on like maybe there is a tool that's one you can recommend for them to like identify like some performance issue or bottlenecks. Are there tools like that? Cases whereby you can maybe might not maybe tool or like extension, something that when you're writing your code, it just pops up that um I don't know, I'm just saying, right? I'm just like trying to explain what the person asked. Can just pop up like, okay, this actual function can be I think what Git Copilot does, I don't know, but for Copilot it's more like gives you ahead what you should write, right? So maybe there's something that can help to say, okay, this function you've written can be optimized in this way. It just notifies.
Well, what Copilot does is GitHub Copilot. It helps you suggest, like it's
Yes,
preparing
I heard.
what to write. I know of it too, but I've forgotten it. It's in Visual Studio. Is it Refactor or something? Refactor or something. It's been a long time.
Refactor.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can't remember. Like, so what it does is can actually suggest that this can be written, but also you can configure those things, right? You can configure your if you're using TypeScript, that's why TypeScript is good. TypeScript, you can configure your lints. So you can do your linting, like your lints, you configure your lints and your TS config actually to suggest some things that, okay, you should write this function in this way, this function naming, it should follow maybe, it's basically just about the naming actually, right? But for you to suggest for tools I know, so you can have something like you can download it. It's on Visual Studio Code extension. It's called Checkmarks, right? So Checkmarks
Check
has a paid
marks.
version. It's called Checkmarks, right? It's going to tell you that you can optimize this because it's going to what Checkmarks does is Checkmarks is a security tool that scans for um, OAPs. It usually scans for OAP security issues like broken authentication, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, hijacking and all those, clickjacking and all those things. So you can actually download Checkmarks. It's free. It can prompt you, and you can download SonarQube. These are the two I know because these are the two I'm currently using. Because where I work, you don't
Okay.
just put anything; you must scan. So it can optimize it and tell you where there are issues, right?
Okay. Is it
Also,
is it for back end, front end, or anyone?
yeah, it's on your VS Code. I know VS Code
Okay.
has it. It's for back end and front end. It can suggest for you
Okay.
actually if the function is going to have issues or your there's a security issue inside your function. Even if it's working, but there's a security issue, it can actually tell you before it pushes the code to the pipeline.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Generally, do you have anything to just say, like what of should I say what of advice to upcoming JavaScript developers? Like others, people that are listening, right? Maybe you have something to tell them that they should watch out for while they are writing, so they while they are writing their code, so they can put that in mind while they are writing, so they know how to structure a proper JavaScript code base.
Okay, so yes, thank you so much. I have a few things to say. Um, I would say keep learning. First of all, keep learning. Keep
Okay.
learning. The technology is evolving, right? To be relevant in this industry, you need to keep evolving because people are actually learning. You should learn best practices. It's not about it's working. Just learn best practices and implement them. Also, take into consideration that a good work, right, is better than the one that you finished early because you are trying to meet deadline. Take your time. It's better you are late to push your code that doesn't have issues than you rush, and when you raise a pull request or you do a trunk based, because if you are doing trunk based development, you're committing to main, and you have too many iterations. What I mean is, you review your code, you check it, you push again, you review your code, you check it. You don't want to have that. Take your time, trust the process. I know time is of essence, but also it's best to be late with a good code than to be early and you keep having crazy iterations. Trust me, that thing kills your confidence because you begin to question yourself, right? So please take your time to learn best practices, keep learning. I will always say keep learning, keep learning, keep learning, and you should be fine in any part you find yourself. So those are just the two advice I have for the community.
Sorry before you go. I think I'm so sorry, but I think
Sorry.
I will need to ask this question. First is you help us with your book. Yeah, I think we need to because um dropping your profile, your biography, people were like, okay, links to the book. So maybe you can share the link to the book so that I could share. Whoever wants to get can get. And also, this question is what I really want to ask this question because I think it's best the person hears the answer from you directly. When someone is like a junior JavaScript developer, because we are talking about JavaScript, so I'll be pointing to JavaScript. And now the person is just starting and the person is a JavaScript developer. We all know the person might not be so good with the practices or might not even have so much idea on what like the pattern or practice should be about. Do you advise such a person to work in a company that doesn't have like him reporting to like a guardian or like a senior person? Do you think it's advisable for such a person to be in a company that's whereby he's just the one pushing directly, nobody's reviewing, is working fine and is working fine, but nobody's reviewing his codes or nobody's telling him, okay, I think you need to improve on this. Do you think the person should work in such an environment?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. First of all, you don't know the environment you're going to work in. Have that at the back of your mind. You don't know if you're going to have any mentor. And if you don't have any mentor, what do you do? So
Yeah.
you are not going to quit the place because they are not reporting to anybody. That is why I said keep learning, keep reviewing best practices. There are people you can follow who actually writes JavaScript code. For example, I follow someone like Ben Howard, right? I follow Ben
Ben
Howard.
Howard.
Yes, Ben
Okay.
Howard. I also follow Travis Media, right? I follow these people because I feel they can give me best practices, and I also look at documentations. You just need to keep learning because in your close circle of that, you are the only developer in that company. You think you are writing fantastic code. When you go out there and your peers are talking, you are just looking like, what's going on here?
What are they
What
saying?
are they saying? So you need, if it's something that you really want, because for me, I'm so much I have so much passion for code. Like I eat code every day. right? I invested time learning this. So I feel that you should also take out your time, learn best practices so that you can know if you're on the right path or on the wrong path. So that is my 2 cent advice to whoever asked that question.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Anthony. Yeah. Thank you for the information you shared. Really, I know some persons would have really learned a lot. Because personally, for me, I think if I'm going back to my workplace, I'm going to do things better because I've learned from you. I learned some things I need to stop doing and some things I need to start doing. And I'm sure the listeners too have also learned one or two things from you. So thank you so much for accepting to share this knowledge with us. We are grateful.
Thank you for inviting me. And one last thing, it's all about giving back to the community because I never had anyone tell me things that I'm telling people right now. So I'm always
Wow,
happy to give
wow,
back to the
wow.
community.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
How was it now?
Hi.
Us with the most.
I don't know. Today is not really a cool time. I don't know why.
But I did enjoy the session actually. I guess probably just the network issue and all. But then
Yeah, I think we need
I
to
still enjoyed
apologize
it.
to
I
our
still enjoyed a
guests.
bit of it. Learning from new bosses from the industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our guests have really enjoyed today's service. We are so sorry, right? Because the network is really bad. We are really sorry. It's so unlike us. So pardon us for today. And I'm sure when you go back to listening to this video, you would still gain one or two things and share with your friends. Follow us on Instagram. We'll be sharing this to our podcast platforms because I think that's where we started from. So we'll be sharing it to our podcast platform. So you can check us up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, majorly. We got the news that Radio Cast is going to be shutting down in March. So, but you can still check us up there before they shut down totally. So, and any other podcast platform you can think of, we are actually on different podcast platforms. Once again, we are really sorry for today's network issue. We plan to do it better next time, next podcast, which is next week. But for next week, we will not be using YouTube, we'll be using Twitter. We want to be enjoying different platforms now. So we don't just satisfy a particular listeners, right? That's why we are doing podcast, YouTube, and Twitter. So for next event, which is coming Saturday, we'll be using our Twitter live. So you can go to Twitter now to follow us so you don't miss out from the event on Twitter because events are on Twitter will not be coming on YouTube. Event on YouTube goes to podcast, event on Twitter goes to podcast, but event on YouTube doesn't go to Twitter, and event on Twitter doesn't go to YouTube. So I think podcast has all of the information, all of the package. So it's either you follow us on podcast to listen to the information, or you follow us on other platforms so you don't miss out for either YouTube or Twitter. See you next week and thank you for staying up until now.